I'd like to call this meeting of the Lakewood City Council for Monday, November 19th to order. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Barth. Councilmember Boki. Councilmember Brandstetter. Here. Councilmember Moss. Here. Councilmember Simpson. Here. Deputy Mayor Whalen.
Present.
Mayor Anderson.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. Now, would you all please rise with me in a moment of silence in honor of our men and women serving overseas, followed by the flag salute.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We now move to proclamations and presentations. And it's always a great pleasure to see the event we have tonight. We have a police commissioning ceremony, the promotion to sergeant of Charles Porche, and the commissioning of officers Joshua Beauchamp, Savannah Brown, Travis Elisara, Joshua Northcutt, and Brandon Smith. So, Chief?
We started this some time ago in doing our commissionings with your meetings, just to share in some of the excitement of bringing new people on the department, and also the promotions. Just it's such a positive thing, and it's worth sharing with you all and with the public. I'd like to call each one up one at a time. We'll have them up here, and then we'll have Judge Adams come up and read the oath of office. So if I could first have Officer Savannah Brown. Oh, Savannah, if you want to come on up. So Savannah is, in some regards, the sort of the perfect candidate. She has military experience. She's college educated, and I would go out on a limb and say probably one of the most likable people you'll ever meet. And to meet one of the city manager's criteria, she's from Boston. So
you were doing real well until then.
Yeah. So next, if I could have Officer Travis Elisara. So as Travis comes up, kind of an interesting part of his background is his parents are both educators, and while growing up, actually spent some time here in Lakewood, and his dad was an assistant principal at Clover Park in the late 90s for a year. Travis is also college educated, and I do have to say that he attended the Harvard of Southeast Washington, Washington State University. Next, if I could have Brandon Smith come up. So Brandon is on his second career with us in law enforcement. His first career for many years was as a youth pastor. He finally decided to get into the family business, as his dad is a retired law enforcement officer and his brother is active law enforcement in California. Happy to have him finally get into the family business. So these are our three entry-level officers. We also have two lateral officers. If I could first have Officer Joshua Beauchamp come up. Joshua comes to us from Milton PD. He also spent some time with, a very short time with Seattle. While at Milton PD, he was able to work with a lot of our officers on as an EVOC instructor and on our civil disturbance team, and I received nothing but resounding praise and endorsements from our own officers that have already worked with him. So definitely a good pickup for us. And then Officer Joshua Northcutt, who actually began his law enforcement career in Wyoming. He's from Southern California, made his way out to Wyoming, and then moved to Seattle for a short time before hearing how good things are here in Lakewood and deciding to come down and join us. So also very pleased to have Josh come on board. And then finally, we also have one promotion. If I could have Sergeant Charles Porche come down. Many of you probably recognize Charles as the shadowy figure from the back of the council meetings. Many nights will be back there. Charles has been a leader on this department since the day we started. His rank has not reflected it, but he has always been a leader, always been somebody that officers and I look to for guidance. It is with great pride that I'm able to promote him to sergeant. He'll undoubtedly do great things for us. So here are our 5 officers and our sergeant that we're going to be commissioning tonight. So After those introductions, I'll have Judge Adams please come up. If I could have our candidates turn towards the judge.
I'll come around this way.
You're good.
I had to ask. Go with the guy from Wyoming, new Sheriff Longmire.
Yeah.
It's just too good to pass up. It's cold in here for some reason. So we now move to the public comment section of our agenda. This is when any member of the public may speak to any issue, whether or not it is on the agenda. Please come to the podium when your name is called. You have 3 minutes to speak. The yellow light comes on at a 30-second warning. The red light comes on when your time is up. Please identify yourself when you come to the mic, such as Jason Whalen and your city, Lakewood, Washington. The first person who's signed up is Christy Flynn.
Good evening. Hello, I'm Christy Flynn, and in my role as Dean of Library and Learning Resources for the Pierce College District, I oversee the Lakewood Computer Clubhouse as one of Pierce College's community connections and learning resources. And so I thank you for the opportunity to come before you this evening and for your past support of the Lakewood Computer Clubhouse. The Lakewood Computer Clubhouse has been a partnership between Pierce College, the Clover Park School District, and the City of Lakewood for 15 years. And this year at Lockburn, the clubhouse serves about 15 youth each day, 5 days a week. We provide a safe space for youth offering STEM activities, including 3D design, game development, and engineering. And this year, we also have a winter break planned in January in partnership with the Pierce County Library, where 25 girls in grades 8 through 12 will be designing their own board games and video games with mentorship of professional designers from DigiPen and elsewhere. We also just received $10,000 from Best Buy to update and renew technology for the youth of Lakewood and to be able to take some of our STEM activities to schools and other youth events. So as part of our work as our program coordinator, who is sitting back here, Stella Kemper, has also been involved in the planning of the upcoming Youth Summit, including finding a venue and providing mentors. So with the City of Lakewood funding and the Human Services funding is proposed to be cut to a zero this year. And so with that loss in Stella's salary, her ability to continue in this work is questionable. And because this program, the Lakewood Computer Clubhouse, runs on an academic year, cutting that human services funding in January then closes that program at the end of December, halfway through an academic year, which is, it complicates things for Pierce College, it complicates things for the Clover Park School District, and especially for the 15 youth who are coming to that program every day after school, and for our winter break activities. So I guess my request tonight is to restore the funding for 2019, but if that's not possible, I'd really like to see the funding restored to get us through the end of this academic year. I think we could shutter the clubhouse and close the doors at the end of June, but I think it would be a real hardship to all of us if we had to shut things down right in December at the end of the year. So I'd like to request, if it's not to be restored fully, to be restored in terms of the $12,000 in funding, which would give us the opportunity to fund it through June. We would regroup over the summer and see what we could come up with for the fall with a different funding source. So thank you for your time. Thank you for your consideration. Again, thanks for the 15 years that we've partnered on this project together. Good luck.
Next person is Mr. Dennis Haugen.
Dennis Haugen, Lakewood, put your bets on 2020.
Among the lowest things that
then they're talking about build a wall. So why do you need a Young Black Summit to do it? Because it was not a summit. It was a Make America Great rally. The use of young blacks as props, which really is an insult to them.
Are you insulted by that? Are you a prop? I thought it was tremendously hurtful, and it was also frustrating because we had a lot of students there who literally were coming out of group homes, who didn't know what to wear, who were wearing their grandma's dresses, and the amount of emotion when Don Jr. came out the night before, they were just crying, and they were so thankful that a president had ever invited them to the White House, that we went above and beyond to make sure that we could cover their expenses, and to have him just insult the entire movement without reaching out to so much as one.
She's got goals and she's got a lot of people, and the competition between her and Sharpton. Sharpton will lose.
Next person signed up to speak is Matthew Wilson.
Hello, my name is Matthew Wilson, and I live in Puyallup, Washington, but Lakewood holds a dear place in my heart because I went to John Dower Elementary. I'm the Director of Programs at Oasis Youth Center. I want to say thank you to the City of Lakewood for supporting gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender youth in our community. We're deeply appreciative of that. Located in Tacoma, Oasis offers educational and innovative programs for LGBTQ youth throughout Pierce County. We facilitate safe and fun alternatives for youth outside of school hours. We are open 6 days a week for programming and offer a range of activities from middle schoolers all the way up to young adults. During our program hours, youth engage in affirming activities to increase mental health support, prevent violence, and develop leaders. We're on track to serve about 1,000 youth this year, and 16% of those youth are from Lakewood. We're proud to report that with full funding from the City of Lakewood, we'll be able to partner more closely and open up a satellite location here in the city. We recently opened a satellite location in the Key Peninsula area, and it's been welcomed in the community, and we're starting to see a lot of success, and so we're excited to expand into the City of Lakewood and serve even more youth. The youth that come to the Key Peninsula Youth Center say that they feel valued and seen in their community, and that they're accessing Oasis services only because it is closer in proximity to their home and school. So we expect to have similar success here in Lakewood. In a world that often forgets and neglects LGBTQ youth, I appreciate the City of Lakewood for sending a message loud and clear that Lakewood is inclusive, welcoming, and a place for bright futures for LGBTQ youth. Thank you.
Next person who signed up is Elizabeth Howe.
Good evening. I'm Elizabeth Howe. I'm with the Emergency Food Network, and I really just want to say thank you very much for your recommendation to fund EFN again. We work with 71 different food banks, hot meal sites, and shelters, 9 of which are located right here in Lakewood. And in 2018, we're on track to serve over 20,000 unduplicated visits just at those 9 sites. So we would appreciate any and all support that you give, and we would put it to good use. So thank you.
Next is Kim Mackey.
Hello, my name is Kim Mackey. I'm here tonight as an Oasis bridge builder and as a 35-year Lakewood resident. I've lived in Lakewood for that long because I know that this community supports its youth and its families. And I've been supporting Oasis for about 8 years. I know that their work is important to all of our youth, so I've been there supporting them all this time, and I'll continue to do that for as long as they need me. I know that Lakewood has supported Oasis financially in the past, and I'm grateful for that. It makes me proud to know that my community is supporting youth all over Pierce County. The Lakewood satellite is exciting to me to know that youth from here could come to their own, or stay in their own community and get the support and peer activity that they need without having to access transportation or have other barriers. Some of the ways that this increased funding could support youth in our community is that there are youth like Anthony who need support and access to mental health services. And through OASIS, he could find competent, qualified care providers for LGBTQ youth. There are also youth like Andrew who attends a local middle school, and he can access Project 13, which is OASIS's middle school programs. It's actually a nationally recognized program that parents and youth can access. So that's something that OASIS is known for, is having innovative supportive programming. Then there's youth like Tiana, who want to get connected with peers and find support and resources from adults. That way, Tiana can actually live out who she is with support, and also to see herself in peers and to get the support she needs to move forward and have an authentic life. I wonder, as an adult, what my life might have been like had there been support like OASIS back in the early 80s and late 70s. I think that there are a lot of community members like me who would have had support that would have moved their lives forward in a more positive way. So I'm grateful for Lakewood for supporting OASIS in the past, and I look forward to more partnership in the future. Thank you for considering this support to them this year, and maybe even into 2020. But we'll cross that bridge later. Thank you.
Next is Liz Heath.
Good evening. My name is Liz Heath, and I'm the Interim Director of Communities and Schools of Lakewood. And I brought our report card to share with you, and I'm told if I hand it to you, you'll pass it on. I know yours is not an easy decision. I have sat on the allocations side of the fence a number of times, and I know how challenging it is to balance everything. Unfortunately, for communities and schools, it has serious impact. We have worked last year with 2,800 students in one level or another. But I want to tell you a little bit about just a few of them. Last year, out of all the students we were serving at Clover Park High School, we served 19 seniors. At the Christmas break, the winter break, we realized that of those 19, 13 were in real danger of not graduating. And that became even more obvious by the time spring break rolled around. So our staff jumped into gear, met with these students daily, weekly, helped them set goals, helped them take incremental steps towards graduation, helped them with their challenges that have nothing to do with academics, such as food, housing, abuse, and other kinds of problems. And the short story is, because it's the important part of the story, all 13 of those students graduated. 10% of the graduating class of Clover Park High School were students that we worked with. A cut in funding is going to change that, and we're really sorry. We really appreciate the funding that the City of Lakewood has provided to communities and schools over the years, and as I have said before, I understand the challenges of balancing all of the needs in the community. I am sad that we're not going to be able to do as much as we have been in the past. Thank you.
Next is Sue Potter.
Hi, I'm Sue Potter. I'm the Executive Director of Nourish Pierce County and a lifelong Lakewood resident. Go Dower Dragons. I am here to thank you all for your consistent and very generous support of Nourish, formerly known as Fish Food Banks of Pierce County. Hunger in Lakewood is not going away. We're very happy to be serving here for over 40 years now. We have 3 sites in Lakewood, our brick and mortar site on Steilacoom Boulevard, and we also have an innovative semi-truck that has been turned into a mobile food pantry that serves Steilacoom and Woodbrook. This year alone, we'll see, it looks like the trajectory is to be over 8,500 unique Lakewood residents from Lakewood zip codes visiting our food banks. And just for giggles, I Googled the population of Lakewood, which in the last census was 60,296 residents, and that means we are serving 14% of the Lakewood population just through Nourish food banks. That's a pretty significant number. We know in Pierce County that 1 in 7 lack the financial resources to have consistent sources of food. We know that 1 in 3 of the people we serve at our Lakewood locations are kids under the age of 18. Kids need food. We also know that we've seen a 9% increase in the number of seniors we serve at those locations. And it's really heartbreaking for me to see seniors who've worked so hard suddenly find themselves without the retirement funds or the income needed, and they have to make choices between food and housing or groceries and rent. We couldn't keep our doors open without partners like the city, so thank you for all you've done. And unfortunately, Feeding America projects that we'll see a 40% growth in our numbers next year. Nourish is working hard to make sure that we have things in place to serve those clients, including looking at expanding our site locations in Lakewood. We're not gonna let Lakewood down, and as a homegirl, I wanna see us thrive here and help my neighbors. So thank you for making it possible, and I really appreciate all of your support.
That's all the people who've signed up for public comment, but if there's, oh, excuse me, there's another page. David Flengy.
Thank you, Mayor Anderson and council members. I'm David Flenchie. I'm the CEO at Community Healthcare. We've been serving Lakewood since 1980, providing services to underserved and uninsured patients since that time. I'm here tonight to support the recommended request of $20,000 to help us add a provider and support staff that will enable us to provide prompt care to uninsured patients in Lakewood, the city of Lakewood. If you have the materials, you'll see that we're expecting with your funds to be able to serve an additional 1,000 people. I think the state of the art in medical care these days is changing. You'll see that all of the medical providers are adding urgent care or prompt care sites. And one of the reasons is because people are expecting different things from their healthcare providers. At Community Healthcare, the way that we have used prompt care is to make sure that people who want to see their own provider but are unable to do that because their provider is at the hospital delivering babies or doing other things that make it impossible for them to see their patients, can see a provider who's a partner of their provider who has access to their medical history and records. And that's why we believe we'll be able to serve 1,000 additional people. So thank you very much.
Next is James Harper, excuse me.
My name is James Harper, and I'm here representing the St. Leo Food Connection, and I'm a resident of Tacoma, transplant to the Pierce County area from places afar, Arizona. And I just wanted to thank the City Council for, and the City of Lakewood for supporting both our Springbrook Mobile Food Bank and our children's programs this year. They have been in, we've been a presence in Tacoma since 2006 by partnering with Human Services to bring the mobile food bank to Lakewood. And since then, we have served hundreds of households every weekend. And with your support, we're going to be able to continue to serve those households. We recently increased our numbers from serving about 150 to about 200 households every weekend. and we are very excited to be able to continue doing that. In addition, we're going to be able to continue serving hundreds of kids at Lakewood schools through our backpack program and through our summer meals programs to help them get the food that they need to be successful and to learn. So thank you so much for all of your support. I also wanted to thank the Human Services Department. They've done a fantastic job in being partners with us. I want to thank all of our partners in the community and all the social services providers out here, because they've all dedicated their lives to doing really great work in the community. And I'm constantly amazed as a transplant coming in and just seeing all of these amazing people who work together to make our community better. And then the last thing I wanted to do is also thank our clients and these residents of Lakewood, because they bring an aspect to our programs that is really ineffable. They bring a lot of sense of community to it. They volunteer in those programs, and they make them possible even with a very small staff. So yeah, thank you.
Now, that is all the people who have signed up, and that doesn't preclude you from speaking. If you wish to, please approach the mic and queue up behind the speaker, and we'll give you each a turn. But come up at this point, and when the line's exhausted, we will close public comment.
Spaith, Lakewood. I'm concerned with the safety of the street clock. I think you all know where it's located, but the building has been broken into quite a number of times, and it's hard to say if all the pieces are still there. I don't have access. I haven't seen it before it was even, well, I haven't seen it since it was taken down, so I don't know that all the pieces are there, whether it'll be more expensive to put back together or whatever, but I would appreciate it if the city would either capture it and put it in a safe place, or arrange for something in that order, because I think it'll be a loss to the Motor Avenue rework and the historic district. So thank you.
Next.
Hello, my name is Daniel Bennett. I am a Lakewood resident since 2016, so I'm relatively new. I'm a disabled veteran and a full-time college student here in Lakewood at Clover Park. I have been having an issue with, and it's not just myself, with several other residents. I spoke here, I believe it was 6 months ago, issues with Merrill Creek Apartments. And since the time that I spoke here last time, they have made relatively no efforts, minus what the city has pressured them to do, to fix the problems that we have been undergoing. I've been trying to make as much noise as I possibly can about the issues, to bring attention to the flooding issues that we have in the apartment complexes, the building code problems that have been continuously identified, the security, or thereby lack of, that is happening there. We are just about now averaging a car break-in or two every week. And Merrill Creek Apartments does not have any security measures that they seem to be willing to implement when I ask. So it is of my informed belief that as of this point, Merrill Creek Apartments is in violation of RCW 59.18.060, and I'm asking for some city help in this issue. I am doing my part in trying to pressure Merrill Creek Apartments by legally withholding my rent, and I gave them notice as of 16 November 2018 under RCW 59.18.110 and 59.18.115. And I'm just hoping that the city could help listen to us residents, because I know it's not just me who's having issues. There's actually, in fact, a large military community that lives at Merrill Creek Apartments due to their proximity to the military base. And so my fellow service members are also suffering because of the issues that we are having at that apartment complex. Thank you for your time, and I'll give my last copy to you guys.
Does anyone else wish to speak at public comment? Or go to SJA, legal assistance.
Hello. My boss, Christy Flynn, spoke to you all earlier about the Lakewood Computer Clubhouse. I really wanted to take a moment to thank you all for your support of the program so far. I've been coordinator of the clubhouse for a little bit over a year now. I started as an AmeriCorps volunteer in August of 2017 and was able to continue as an employee after my term of service ended. And to share with you all some of the things that the support that the City of Lakewood has provided so far have done in reality for students. Saying that we have 15 to 20 kids coming every day doesn't tell you that there are kids who have been there 100 times in the past year. Kids who are there every day that they're physically able to be there, kids who sometimes come to school for a half day when they're not feeling well so that they can come to the computer clubhouse afterwards, youth that I've been able to direct towards extracurricular programs, specialty high schools that suit their interests, kids that have learned new skills, kids that have been able to learn how to interact with their friends in a healthier way, because so often in the school day they don't have opportunity for that education around the social and emotional development that they normally experience and need to learn to grow. I don't envy the position that you all have looking at a budget and especially looking at services to youth, because I think we all know money spent on youth development is never money poorly spent. But youth have a lot of needs. They need food, they need housing, they need vaccinations, and they need caring adults in their lives to be there to inspire them, and they need hope for what their futures can look like. And that's what these kinds of programs truly provide. It's hard looking at those numbers and saying 15 youth per day when we know how great the need is in the city here. And my hope is that this partnership can continue moving forward in this model or in a completely different model that's looking realistically at where the city of Lakewood is at in 2018, where it'll be in 2020 and 2025, and what those youth need to continue to carry that hope forward for their futures. So thank you all for your support so far.
Does anyone else wish to speak at public comment? Seeing none, I declare public comment closed. We now move to the consent agenda, Madam Clerk.
A, approval of the minutes of the City Council meeting of November 5th, 2018. B, motion number 2018-78, approving the 2019 Human Services funding allocations. C, motion number 2018-79, approving the 2019 lodging tax funding allocations. D, resolution number 2018-17, authorizing the execution of an interlocal agreement with Clover Park Technical College for city payment for power used by certain city-owned streetlights. E, resolution number 2018-18, approving the 2019 fee schedule. F, items filed in the office of the city clerk. 1, Lakewood's Arts Commission meeting minutes of July 9th, 2018. 2, Lakewood Arts Commission meeting minutes of August 6, 2018. 3, Lakewood Arts Commission meeting minutes of September 10th, 2018. 4, Parks and Recreation Advisory Board meeting minutes of September 25th, 2018. 5, Lakewood Arts Commission meeting minutes of October 1st, 2018. 6, Lakewood's Promise Advisory Board meeting minutes of October 4th, 2018. And 7, Planning Commission meeting minutes of October 17th, 2018.
Thank you. Is there any item which any member of the council wishes to have removed from the consent agenda? Hearing none, I entertain a motion.
Seconded.
It's been moved by Ms. Barth, seconded by Mr. Simpson, that we adopt the consent agenda. Is there any further discussion? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. We now move to the regular agenda, ordinance number 699. Madam Clerk.
Ordinance number 699, adopting the 2019 property tax levy.
For this, we have Ms. Kraus.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. This item was reviewed at the September 24th study session. We had the public hearing on November 5th. The recommendation is that the City Council adopt this ordinance to increase the property tax by 1% as allowed by state law.
Any questions for Ms. Kraus? Entertain a motion. been moved by Ms. Moss, seconded by Mr. Branstetter, that we adopt ordinance number 699. Is there any further discussion by council? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Next, ordinance number 700, Madam Clerk.
Ordinance number 700, adopting the 2019 to 2020 biennial budget.
Ms. Kraus.
Good evening again. For the 2019 and 20 biennial budget, we've had about 7 meetings related to the biennial budget. The recommendation this evening is to approve the budget as presented.
Are there any questions from Ms. Kraus? Entertain a motion.
So moved. Second.
Been moved by Mr. Simpson, seconded by Ms. Barth, that we adopt the ordinance number 700, the biennial budget. I'm passing the gavel to Mr. Whalen. Has to be recognized to make an amendment, offer an amendment.
Mayor Anderson.
I move that we amend the biennial budget as drafted in the form which you have received earlier today through the city manager's office, to particularly amend the police department's budget to essentially do away with our participation in Metro SWAT. The essential elements of the printed amendment are: 1, we give notice that we are no longer participating in Metro SWAT to the other jurisdictions. Secondly, that we reduce funding for 1 FTE commissioned officer by attrition to balance the amendment. And third, that we develop, or we pay for SWAT specialty services through contract with the Pierce County Sheriff's Department. And fourth, that we develop a high-risk warrant team.
Second. It's been moved by Mayor Anderson and seconded by Councilmember Boki that we amend the 2019-2020 proposed biennial budget as stated. Is there any further discussion?
Yes. Yes, to be recognized.
Mayor Anderson.
My particular concern that is addressed by this motion is to eliminate the risk encountered in the Thomas case by not performing high-risk police functions outside the city of Lakewood, except as is customary and required by our mutual aid agreements and responsibilities. Taking on the risk of SWAT calls initiated and practically in many cases controlled by jurisdictions over which we have no control exposes us to literally millions of dollars worth of risk without any great benefit. There is some economy of scale, and I'll be the first to admit that. This would require training more officers. It is a good thing that we would train more officers with respect to the high-risk warrant team, but primarily it would eliminate that risk to a great extent to the limited calls that we have within the city of Lakewood. Continuing as in Metro SWAT, we would always be the leader in Metro SWAT. We would always be the critical mass of Metro SWAT, and we would always be the principal target in any suit claiming liability from a SWAT action gone bad. I don't believe we need to factor buying a Bearcat armored vehicle into the equation. We can look for alternative funding if that is necessary, but it should be available to rent essentially from a jurisdiction that has one, because we don't have it on site anyway. So that's my amendment and rationale.
So just to clarify the discussion on the amendment, it would not include adopting any funding proposal for the Bearcats, is that correct?
Correct. Any further discussion? Mr. Brandstetter. Okay. Did you have something, Paul?
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, and I understand the value of no longer absorbing the risk of significant high-risk actions outside the city. That I did have some questions, though, about the budget that was presented to us in that with the packet that received today. I'm looking on page 2, where there is a breakdown of costs for the high-risk warrant team. And I made an assumption that these costs were based on including the additional officers up to 15 from the current number that are currently in the SWAT. So when I looked at when I looked at under the uses section there, in other words, there's I am trying to just get an understanding, are these costs the total annual cost, or are they primarily the costs associated with equipping additional personnel?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that? I didn't hear.
Sure. I'm looking at the uses element of the budget where there's an analysis. And most of those things seem to be individualized. Once I get down below the contracted services and overtime, I get I got ammunition, batteries, tape, storage, night vision, bridge mounts, ballistic eye correction, heat still. Are the numbers that are here on this page reflecting just the fact that we're buying these because we'll have more personnel and the existing personnel that we have will continue to use what they have used as being SWAT members?
So,
because it doesn't tell me how many of each of these are. It just has got a cost.
okay, sure. So the details of how many can be found on, let's see. It's actually, I didn't itemize it here. This is the total amount. And I don't believe we have it itemized in our budget document, but this is my understanding is this is the equipment that is needed to for this high-risk warrant team and the contract with the Pierce County Sheriff's Department. So basically we have the contract with Pierce County Sheriff's Department, some overtime for the police personnel, and then equipment for police personnel.
So what I'm saying is that these are the costs that we would expect to have in 2019 and 2020.
Yes.
And the 2019 costs should include costs to equip more officers than we currently have equipped.
Yes.
So I guess I don't understand why the numbers are then the same in 2019 and 2020. If I buy an officer a uniform, a new officer a uniform in 2019, why do I have that same cost in 2020? If I buy him a ballistic helmet that costs $400 and I spend $1,600 to buy 4 ballistic helmets, why am I buying 4 in 2020?
A reasonable question.
Deputy Mayor? Yeah, so those costs are just ongoing costs the costs that you have before you have a combination of just ongoing costs to keep the high-risk quarantine up and running, and then there's one-time cost to get outfitted the new officers, and then also built into that is just the regular routine wear and tear of replacing equipment on an annual basis.
I guess following that logic, it would seem that in 2019, there would be the cost to equip 4 new officers plus the wear and tear.
That's, yeah, wear and tear top, one time.
Yeah, start up below.
Mm-hmm. That's the
imperishables, I mean, ammunition and.
Yeah. So if you could help me out, Mr. Mayor, where should I go?
Sure, yeah, the time/startup for the initial cost for, I assume, the 4 additional officers on this option that we're pursuing, right?
Right.
Are set forth below under the middle of the page, page 2. Is that right, Ms. Krause?
Yes.
Okay. Yep. So in other words, we've got ballistic helmets in both spots, but I'm assuming that part of it is replacement of existing because the stuff wears out periodically.
So maybe I oversimplify this. If we look at our page 2,
correct,
the top 2 columns are the annual costs of this option for 2019 and 2020, which are replacement, ammunition is an annual training ammunition expense, and that's the ongoing costs, and the startup costs are below, and I think in the middle it labels it equipment for 4 LPD officers and some other one-time equipment. That would be a 2019 cost that wouldn't carry forward, and that 4 officers, the difference between 11 who are currently being trained for SWAT and the 15 that would be trained for high-risk warrant. Is that correct?
Yes.
I do have a follow-up question to that. Okay. You know, assuming we've been doing the Metro SWAT thing for some time, you know, who has and who paid for example, the night vision goggles and the digital pole cam and the, low light observation scope? Do we not have any of that equipment in our own repertoire as a member of Metro SWAT? Or is this just, 4 additional night vision goggles for $7,000 a piece?
Without going through each individual item and going back and researching it, some of the items were purchased by other agencies and some were purchased by us, if you look at all the team assets. So without going back and researching it, I couldn't answer to each specific one, but that's generally how the process worked for equipment.
Okay. Well, Chief, just, on the line item that jumps out at me, the night vision goggles, for example, the $7,000 a piece, how many of those are high dollar items? How many of those do we have in our possession that we own as a city?
I apologize. I'm not prepared to answer that right now. Several,
right, okay.
But I don't know an exact number.
And I've never been involved in an operation, but if there are, 14 to a team, would they all need to be outfitted at the same time with the same equipment?
Not the exact same equipment. Some of it, it depends on if they're assigned to a perimeter versus an interior location. If they have, you could have different positions or assignments that would require certain specialty equipment versus others. So you could kind of pool it that way as opposed to outfitting everybody with it. But for efficiency's sake, everybody having their own is better, but we can also pool some of it.
Okay. The one question I had when we looked at page 3, which was the transferred data from our study session, which had option 6, which is kind of what we're looking at here with the mayor's amendment, and it referenced startup costs of $404,000. And we haven't had a whole lot of time to digest this tonight, so I'm just trying to understand why the numbers are so dramatically different between the option that was presented during the study session and the one before us tonight.
So the difference between the 404,000 and the 154,000 should be the Bearcat. That's not included.
That's the difference? Okay. That makes sense. Okay. Mr. Branstetter.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I do have a question in trying to understand the analysis on page 3. And the cost per incident over the 5-year period of 2019 to 2023. Could I get some explanation of why there is a 3 or more times the cost per incident? In other words, the cost per incident under option 1, which was staying with what we've been doing, is $11,122 per incident. And with the option we're considering, it goes to $33,000 or $37,000 per incident. And is that because we've prorated the startup costs across the envisioned number of incidents for 5 years? Or, and did we, there's 2 numbers, that there's one cost for SWAT instances and one SWAT for war instances. I'm not quite sure I understand how those numbers are derived.
Good evening, Council. To answer that question, the numbers were derived by, yes, prorating the startup costs, but also adding into the cost to contract with Pierce County SWAT.
But does that include the Bearcat?
Yes.
Okay.
So for just a warrant incident, we would go from 11,000 to 33,000 per incident by having our own warrant team? Is that what I'm reading there?
Yes, this is a cost per incident.
So I guess why does it cost if we have our own warrant team 3 times as much? Now, I understand it would be more of our people, then the team would be a mix of, than if the team was a mix of some folks with some other agency. But most of the incidents that we heard about historically had 50% or more Lakewood officers on them currently.
Because it includes the startup costs that are necessary to invest in equipment that we don't have. It also includes, in that analysis beginning on page 3, also includes the Bearcat.
If you divide that out, the 404 divided by the incidents.
So if we don't include the Bearcat, does that number get more reasonable? Trying to figure out where we're at with going forward with future budgets?
Yes, it would be lower. We have not done that analysis because we provided this as just background information to the amendment proposal that we were asked to prepare from last Tuesday evening. And this information comes from the comprehensive analysis of the number of options that we did and that we presented to the council on October 22nd.
Okay, so for the 2019-2020 budget, which is the item under consideration today, that during that period of time, if I don't make it a 5-year thing, I mean, in actual 2019 and 2020 dollars, what's the cost per incident ballpark?
We haven't done that analysis yet, Councilmember.
Okay, but we have a budget. We're approving a number, and we have an estimated number of incidents. I mean, we're expecting to have what, 18 incidents in 2 years for the high risk team.
Yeah, the analysis that you have in front of you that begins on page 3, that includes the high risk warrant team contracting with the Sheriff's Department, coupled with the city having to fully outfit the high risk warrant team, as well as a Bearcat. The budget amendment that is before you we were asked to prepare the amendment based on a zero-sum impact to the existing 1920 biennial budget, which we did, which is shown on page 2 of your packet in front of you. However, what it doesn't include is the Bearcat.
But without the Bearcat, the changes that are proposed in the amendment are zero sum?
Yes, it is, to the budget. So if this amendment passes, we would have to come back to you in early 2019 with, some options or a recommendation on how to address the vehicle issue associated with the Bearcat. The mayor mentioned, perhaps contracting with another agency. If I recall, there's only 2 other agencies in Pierce County that own Bearcats. One is Fife, and I think the other is either Sumner or Bonnie Lake. So we would have to approach them to see, or even Pierce County. I think Pierce County has a similar type vehicle. So we would have to approach one of those agencies to see if they would be willing to lease those to us on a contractual basis. Or we would have to go out and acquire one on our own.
Mr. Boki?
So first of all, really the amendment that we're voting on tonight is that portion in page 2, boxed by LPD, high-risk warrant team in contract with PCSD, including the elimination of the SWAT non-FTE and the officer position. So so in the budget, it's $70,000 for SWAT non-FTE budget, and I would point out that that number is extremely low, that I believe last year the amount was in excess of something like $120,000 or something. So that number is, that we're seeing tonight, is really low. And so I would caution that actually that number is probably on average closer to 100,000. So really the costs that we're talking about really are that 116,000. And if we divide that by 9, we get a different figure by 9 or 12. And I come up with a little less than $10,000 an incident. So, but that's what we're talking about right in the box, right? So, and the startup costs and everything. Okay.
Is that it?
Yep.
Well, it's hard to quantify the risk. If we look at the year that the Thomas case hit, that would add about $40,000 an incident to the cost if you factored in our $1 million. And if you factored in the true cost of the law school or lawsuit settlement of judgment in that case, it would be in excess of $500,000 an incident. And that gets factored back into our insurance rates. So I'm not qualified to make that actuarial computation, but there is a real dollar figure on the risk that, while not necessarily calculable with total accuracy, is a very real number. I'd also point out I think we have a responsibility as a council to do something. Since the Thomas case, we have not done anything. And I feel a responsibility to the voters and taxpayers of Lakewood as a council member to try to make a positive change to make sure that the risk of another Thomas case is, if not eliminated, at least substantially reduced.
Any further discussion? One thing, Mayor, I just wonder if we've actually had much thought about the unintended consequence if we had or could incur potential liability if we weren't prepared for an incident that we were called out to do. That's the only thing that worries me a little bit. But we have they're high-risk warrant incidents mostly that we would be responding to.
Well, that's a high-risk warrant incident. If there's a major incident, I think the chief told us in an earlier session that under mutual aid, we'd expect backup. I'm not the expert on that, but that's what tends to happen. We haven't had a SWAT ILA in place for quite many months now. So.
Any further discussion? Anyone on the dais? If not, the amendment to the proposed ordinance number 700 is on the table. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor of adoption of the amendment signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? The amendment carries. We now move to ordinance 700 as amended.
Move adoption. Well, it has been.
It has been. Is there any further discussion on the motion as amended?
I'll comment on it.
Mr. Boki.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. I do think that our budgeting has improved vastly over the last, in the time frame that I've been here, and I thank the city staff and the city manager. I think you guys do a great job. I think we're much closer. You know, we're in the midst of good times, and I think that this budget really does reflect the priorities of this council, and especially in the areas that are near and dear to my heart, which is capital expenditures for a city. I think that's been starved for it for a long, long time. I think, unfortunately, and I'll discuss something later, but it's going to get tougher, and depending on how the economy goes, it will continue to be difficult. But I do worry about the sustainability, because we do see the numbers and we take those, or at least I take those seriously, that in the future we will have sustainability issues. And I think going forward, maybe as early as next year, we need to have some discussions about certain models of doing business and whatnot. And I think, you know, when we go off to retreats, maybe those are discussions that we need to have, you know, just in case the recession does poke its ugly head. So thank you very much. I think it's a good budget, and I think will lead hopefully to 2 strong years here in the city of Lakewood.
Mayor Anderson.
I too would like to commend staff for excellent work in the budget, the transparency, the detail, the effort to inform, sometimes painful effort to inform the council. But I would also share Mr. Bolke's concern. I just caution my fellow members and our professional staff that I don't see any money in the future for any major initiatives. I see this squeeze coming, and I want to be very cautious moving forward on taking on any ongoing expenditures, because unless some major development takes place in Lakewood which generates tax dollars we don't have now, I see a sustainment budget being something that will be kind of the vision of the future.
Any other questions? Ms. Moss, did you have? Mr. Simpson?
Yes, sir.
Good. Thank you. Well, if there's no other discussion on the budget, just to reiterate, we've had a number of meetings on this, so please don't take our silence as lack of interest. There's been a lot of interest in a lot of areas and a lot of hard work that's gone to on the part of staff and certainly reviewed by council. So if there's no further discussion, all those in favor of adopting ordinance number 700 as amended signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ordinance 700 as amended has been adopted. We have a budget.
We now move to ordinance number 701, Madam Clerk.
Ordinance number 701, adopting the 2018 budget amendments.
For this, we have Ms. Kraus.
So this item was presented to the City Council on October 22nd and November 5th. The items were pretty minimal, and there have been no changes since. The recommendation is to approve the budget adjustment as presented.
Entertain a motion.
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Simpson, seconded by Mr. Bulkey, that we adopt ordinance number 701. Is there any further discussion? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. We now move to ordinance number 702. Madam Clerk.
Ordinance number 702, amending Chapter 3.09 of the Lakewood Municipal Code relating to city funds.
Ms. Kraus.
And this item was presented on November 13th. It's really just a consolidation of the two sewer capital projects. Recommendation is to approve the consolidation.
This is the reason I came here tonight. I'd entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Bulkey, seconded by Ms. Barth, that we adopt ordinance number 702. Is there any further discussion? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Now move to resolutions. Resolution number 2018-19. Madam Clerk.
Resolution number 2018-19, continuing the surcharge on all Lakewood City sewer accounts to complete the sewerage system throughout the city.
Mr. Beauchamp.
Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, members of City Council. This resolution was discussed before the council at the study session last Tuesday, the 12th. There's no additional information I am going to be bringing forward tonight. I'm making myself available to answer any further questions you may have on the resolution.
Any questions for Mr. Beauchamp? Mr. Whalen.
I understand there's no further amendments to any internal ILAs of the county that need to be done. The county collects and remits the sewer surcharge as we've levied it over the years, and that would just continue.
That is correct.
Entertain a motion. Oh, Mr. Bulkey.
So, Mr. Beauchamp, I just, for the record, or at least give us an idea, we have a number of unsewered areas outside the Tillicum-Woodbrook area, which has been the primary emphasis of getting things sewered in this city for more than a decade. How many other locations, or approximately how many thousand feet are we going to need here?
Unfortunately, I don't have those numbers for you. I know that there's a handful, and historically the reason why they have not been sewered is because they are more expensive, but this will give us an option to come to the council when there becomes problems with the septic systems in those areas, add it to our capital program with council approval, and then move forward and fund them.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Entertain a motion.
Second.
It's been moved by Ms. Moss, seconded by Mr. Whalen, that we adopt resolution number 2018-19. Is there any further discussion? Mr. Brandstetter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to speak urging that we not adopt this resolution. My concerns with it, first of all, have something to do with history. This resolution is changing a resolution that the previous city council made in 2004 when it established, it requested the establishment of the surcharge from Pierce County. That resolution was very specific at targeting completing the sanitary sewer system in American Lake Gardens and Tillicum. That is a project that is not completed. It has a good bit of time and a number of incremental activities in order for it to do that. The subsequent to another important piece of that resolution that we are, by the manner of the current resolution before us, specifically spoke to when the Tillicum American Lake Gardens projects were completed, that any remaining balance in the funds related to the surcharge would be returned to the citizens of Lakewood, the ratepayers who paid it. And the agreement that we made with the county regarding this and the initial resolution were all very specifically to completing the infrastructure of the public sewage system that is operated by Pierce County within those areas of Lakewood, or even doing that. And really, the reason we have this resolution before us is not because we're close to finishing Tillicum and American Lake Gardens and we want to move on to the other things of the city, is we're looking for money for a parks capital project, not a sewer system build-out. The city has two roles in the sewer system. We took on the role of helping to build out the sewer system that the Pierce County folks negligently refused to move forward with over many years, and even indicated that they had no intention, but they would operate it if we built it. And second, we have the status of, like everyone else who's a property owner in the city, of being a customer. And being a customer takes on it the responsibility of connecting and funding your own side sewers to be able to lean to do that. That I would like to finish Tillicum and American Lake Gardens and build out the infrastructure source system in those other portions of the city to be able to go and do that. But I am not thinking that it is transparent to divert money from that effort to the city's property owner side sewer costs, which is what, even though the resolution doesn't say that, in the study session we heard that's really the intent, okay, to be able to go and do that. And that money that would go to those side sewer costs is the kind of money that would have been intended at some point in time in the future to be refunded to the citizens of Lakewood. And I can think back to 2004 when I did not testify at the public hearing around this measure, but it was actually, there were quite a few people that did. And nearly everyone came and testified in favor of enacting the surcharge, citizens. They spoke about it's the right thing to do because not only was there areas of Lakewood that didn't have sewers, but it was unfortunately some of the lowest income areas about being able to go and do that. And citizens were generally positive of saying, we'll take on a surcharge because that's the right thing to do as a city to be able to go and do that. That I think we're going beyond that when we're saying what we want to do is we want to not only build out the thing, but we want to, before we complete the other, make a way for us to be able to take funding and use it for our side sewers of city things to do that. Not that I disagree that we need to run the sewers through the various amenities that we have at Porche Park. I do. I just don't think this funding source, in a very untransparent way, because it isn't mentioned at all in the Constitution. I would also note that I asked the city manager about the question about we'd have to amend our agreement with Pierce County, where they passed the ordinance and said, follow the agreement. and do that, and that the agreement is solely focused on American Lake Gardens and Tillicum. And it specifically has a section 10 in it that says any modifications of the agreement require the approval of both the city and the county, just like any other interlocal type agreement, to be able to go and do that. So I don't know which functionary at the county rendered the opinion of we don't care, we don't need to change anything. But the wording, you know, that specifically says any modification requires both parties seems actually pretty clear to me. So anyway, I intend to vote against the resolution because of, I don't think it keeps faith with the history of the surcharge. And I don't think that it is transparent.
As to the facts of history and what the council looked at in 2004, I'm in agreement with Mr. Brandstetter. The council was very reluctant to impose an additional charge. In the interest of being transparent, though, I will say, and being one that's generally opposed to raising taxes as a general principle, I don't consider this a fee. I consider it a tax. I think it's a valid tax for infrastructure. Sewer is a basic infrastructure, and what may go down as my worst quote ever, you know, whose poop is it anyway? You go out to Fort Steilacoom Park, the city doesn't magically create sewage. It's the people of Lakewood who need sanitary treatment of their waste when they're at the park or they're at home or if they're at a business. And so, irrespective of any prior council's intentions for the future, if it's not written into ordinance, and if it's written into one, it can be changed, which I don't believe it is. I believe that continuing this surcharge for the foreseeable future to provide universal sewage treatment to the city of Lakewood, whether it's a public facility or it's an area that doesn't have sewer mains, is a valid use of and an appropriate use of tax money. I don't like paying more for my sewer bill than anybody else. It's not providing an extra service to my house, but I think it's good for the city. So, Mr. Simpson.
I can get it to work. There we go. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hobson spoke of a choice. And that choice was either the bed's too small or the bed's too large. And either your legs will be cut off or you will be stretched. And that's what we have here. Now, I tend to agree with Councilmember Brandstetter that a promise made is one that should be kept. I think the mayor called it keeping faith. On the other hand, economic growth is essential to this city, and part of that has to do with that park and the fact that it should have the amenities required that we would require throughout the city. And so we do have a tough call here because emotionally I feel that we should take one target at a time, and that was the target set up in 2004. We haven't finished the job. On the other hand, we are growing, and as Mr. Boakey pointed out earlier this evening, these are good times, and perhaps now is a good time to strike while the anvil is hot. I'm going to vote in favor of this amendment, or this, this resolution, but I'm doing so reluctantly because I feel, I step away from the mind and look at the heart, that maybe we just broke a promise. Thank you.
Mr. Bolke.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple questions for staff then. We mentioned the new project, which would be Fort Silicon Park. But explain or bring us up to date on what the plans are in the Tillicum-Woodbrook area.
So with the exception of that one project, all the projects that have been brought forward to council through the budget process are all in the Tillicum-Woodbrook area. So until another project in the next budget cycle, should one come forward outside of that Tillicum-Woodbrook area, we have no current plans for another project, just that one. That's Fort Silicon Park. The other thing I wanted to mention is that the resolution that was originally sent to the county is a little conflicting when you look at it, because it looks like the 4.75% can be used not only for debt service, but also for construction, design and construction. But then there's a second part to it at the back end that says it will be used for retirement of debt service. So that's the way we've been operating. When you look at, if you recall back last spring, the FCS group did a financial analysis for us, and they looked at whether it made sense to complete those sewer projects in the Tillicum-Woodbrook area sooner by going out and getting debt and then using the 4.75% surcharge to pay for it. Or use the 4.75% surcharge, the revenue coming in, to pay for those projects on a pay-as-you-go basis. And the analysis showed that we could go get loans. Grants for these types of facilities basically would come from Pierce County, and we can't guarantee we're going to get money from them on an annual basis. Besides, they only have $250,000 every year set aside that we all compete for. So these projects cost much more than that. The analysis showed that it makes a lot more sense to identify that the 4.75% can not only be used for retirement of the debt service on the loans already obtained for the work done in the Tillicum-Woodbrook area, but also to use that as a revenue stream to pay for the new projects that are in that area and identified to be utilized. Of all the projects, as I indicated, that's currently come before the council, only one is outside that area, and that is the Fort Silicon Park. And I understand where the council's angst on that comes from. It's a tough decision. Our recommendation has been that because it is part of the sewer service for the community, it makes sense to use the revenue for that purpose for that one project that we have laid out there right now. Last Tuesday, I told the council that we have over 1 million visitors coming to the park. We have major events that go on that you're all very much in favor of. We have a lot of visitors come in for those, and we basically have 2 bathrooms and a whole bunch of Sandy cans. So this process is going to allow us to build another bathroom, build out the H-barn, which will be used for many different events that's anticipated, and then also take the home, the shop, and the pavilion and take them off septic and put them back into the sewer and discharge that into Pierce County. The one nuance is because it is entirely on the city property, the park property, it is highly unlikely that Pierce County would be interested in taking over that system. We can't explore that with them. Usually when they take over a system, they want it built to a much higher standard than what you would for this type of a system. I can tell you right now, there's one manhole. They already told us that they want to have a special liner in. That's an additional $30,000. And from an engineering perspective and our perspective, based on the use, it doesn't make any sense to do that. So we're pushing back on that. So I believe that if we were able to convince them to take ownership of the system, that our costs would go up quite a bit. So that's, in my mind, that's the nut of where it seems the council is having some consternation, is taking the money that's 4.75% and using it outside of that area. Even if the Fort Silicon Park, if you chose not to spend the money on that one, there are other areas of the city that will need sewer. And then without a resolution of this nature, we will not be able to provide sewer service to those areas outside the Tillicum-Woodbrook area. And by the way, any future projects would come before you for consideration and approval. Just so, want to make sure it's clear.
So right now the Santa cans for events, if I bring a big event in, I pay for the extra Santa cans.
Right.
So when you say things like Summerfest, which I guess would be our biggest, we pay for those, correct?
I'm not the parks director, but I assume that we do. And I also know that the number of new facilities, as far as the number of bathroom facilities, would not be able to handle that total event, but it would help. This is more about the constant users on a day-to-day basis coming through the dog park, parking there, using the dog park, using around the lake. I should be careful when I say using around the lake, but we really want them focused on a spot in the bathroom. I'm going to stop digging myself deeper. I'm sorry.
You did good. So by my math, the projections for the 4.75 are 745,000 in 19, 765,000 in 2020. Your debt service is a little bit less than $500,000.
Right.
So, and we're paying as we go. But debt will begin to roll off kind of the middle of next decade, I think, or as early as, I don't know, go ahead. It's all 20-year debt.
Affirmative. In summary, if you recall from earlier this year when we brought forward the comprehensive stormwater and sewer capital improvement program, on the sewer side, under our recommendation, which is to just pay off the debt we have and then go pay as you go with the sewer availability charges and the 4.75% surcharge, we will essentially be able to build out sewers in both Tillicum and Woodbrook. Actually, Woodbrook is just about completed by 2032 or 2034, I recall. And so the cash flow that we have, what that allows us to do is it allows us to design a major project in even-numbered years. So for example, we're designing North Thorn Lane this year, which actually includes running sewers into Harry Todd Park for latrine services there as well. And then we'll build it in 19. Then in 2020, we'll kick off another design, and then we'll build another major sewer infrastructure project in Tillicum in 2021, and so forth. So we'll have that every other year. Also built into that cash flow is funding for side sewers, our loan program that we have to allow people to connect, and that has been fairly successful.
Okay, so and I see that loan repayment on sanitary sewers, side service in Fund 204.
Correct.
Sometime about 204. So the plan is to do the North Thorn Lane, including Harry Todd Park, in 19?
In 19, that's under design right now.
When are we trying to do Fort Stilichon?
Same year. Same year.
Okay, so next year we'd be able to do both. Okay, because we do have grant money for Fort Stilichon too?
Yes, we do, actually, if we have state capital monies in support of that project. Actually, in the North Thorn Lane project, knock on wood, the county council is going to be hopefully considering a couple of our applications for sewer grants, which could actually buy down and free up some of this money at both North Thorn Lane project as well as Fort Stilichon as well.
That's correct. We have a $450,000 grant into Pierce County request for the Harry Todd Park, that project. I'd be careful not to call it a park project, but it's North Thorn Lane. And then another I think it was $75,000 we put in for Fort Stilichon Park. We've recently heard, after conversations with them, that they have increased our points on the ratings for both the projects to basically the threshold where they would tell the county council, you should fund both of them. The question is they only have $484,000. Are they willing to basically commit the next year, some of the money for the next year in order to fund both of them this year, which of course is our recommendation. They have done that in the past, so it's not an anomaly. We're waiting to hear.
Okay, and I don't want to get too far afield, but I'm going to ask one more question, Mayor. The Harry Todd Park thing, we would connect right away, right? Everyone else has umpteen years to connect, but I'm assuming the city's policy would be we would connect right away.
We would connect right away because every summer the system out there fails and overflows. And that's one of the reasons why, in fact, it's not like a standard septic system that fails once in a while. I mean, we have 200 visitors a day going out there to use that facility, and when it fails, it fails. And we've got to bring out the pumper trucks, and we got to do a lot of work to kind of bring it back in line. So that was one of our arguments. Don't treat us like one septic failure. It should be more like 10 septic failures.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I guess I have one other question. The ordinance that the resolution that we're replacing with the one that we're considered had a sunset provision.
That's correct.
And the new one doesn't. And the one we're considering tonight doesn't have a sunset provision. So are you seeing that we're changing this from having a sunset provision, even if it was farther on down, to no longer having a sunset?
Councilmember Branstetter, yes.
Mr. Whalen. Keep turning it off.
That was part of my question as well, whether or not, in light of what the city manager mentioned about the pay-as-you-go analysis that we went through earlier, that we would be able to do much of the work within the next 12 years under the pay-as-you-go analysis. It may make some sense to put a sunset on this of 15 years to make sure that we incentivize ourselves to get the work done, but we still promote an end state to the sewer surcharge, and I would be in favor of an amendment to do that. But before we go there, I just want to ask in terms of, I think you answered Mr. Boke's question, so what's ripe in the pipeline would be the Fort Steilacoom Park project as well as the Harry Todd Park project in the Steilacoom neighborhood for 2019?
That's correct.
And would we have anything on the books for 20 or 21?
21.
21, so it's every 2 years roughly is what we're doing?
Cash flow.
Could we get it all done with a 15-year sunset?
I'm sorry, Deputy Mayor Whalen, members of the council, it is within the prerogative of the city to amend it to include a sunset. I would also note that there's language in this agreement which always, when you read agreements later, they turn out to be sort of the something for everyone type of agreements. There is language in there that provides for the council to have been reviewing this every couple of years. So that's an option too. There's language that allows for modification. There's language that allows for discontinuance short of the sunset. But if you want to belt and suspenders, it would be more in keeping with the original intent to put the sunset on there, and you could amend it accordingly.
Well, I certainly don't think it was contemplated that we would drop it before we paid the debt service.
Correct.
And that's another about 5 years, it looks like, if we do nothing else. It's about 4.8,775,000 a year. Yeah.
It's a little further out. It's
yeah. So, you know, I'll throw it out there for discussion. I'm not going to make the amendment. I just bring up the issue. If someone wants to take that and run with it, I'm happy to support it. But a final comment is, you know, I'm going to support this with or without a sunset, because if not us, then who? And if not now, then when? Because we can continue to kick the can down the road for any number of things. And one thing I'm proud of this council for doing is tackling things head on and getting stuff done. Building stuff, paving stuff, constructing stuff, budgeting for stuff, and I'm happy to get things done. So I'm going to support it.
Any further comments, discussion? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay?
Nay.
Motion carries. We now move to unfinished business. Is there any unfinished business to come before the council?
No, Mayor.
How about new business? Any new business to come before the council?
Not in our
Then we
end, Mayor.
move to the reports by the city manager, Mr. Caulfield.
Thank you, Mayor. Before I give my report, I'd like to call up Ms. Kraus to give you an update on our receivables write-offs, which is something that we began doing on an annual basis a couple of years ago. So with that, Ms. Kraus.
So this is probably going to be just as exciting as the consolidation of sewer funds. This is the annual write-off of the accounts receivable. We have to take it back to City Council if an item is $250 or more. And for 2018, we have 2 items that meet that criteria. Both of them are related to subrogation, and we're asking the City Council to approve the write-off totaling $4,074.67. This will come back to the City Council as a consent agenda on December 3rd.
Any questions? Thank you. Back to Mr. Caulfield.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, just a number of updates. First of all, last late Thursday afternoon or early evening, we had a bit of an issue over at the police station and the server room that we have there, which is a very secured environment. So we had some smoke. And long story short, some of the batteries began to go through a thermal meltdown. And so West Pierce Fire and Rescue came out. At first, there was no fire. There was just smoke, but there was some toxic fumes. Our IT folks came out. They were able to get the situation under control. As they began looking at the batteries after the fire folks left, a couple of the batteries actually caught on fire. They were able to, suppress the fire and get everything under control. And then, thankfully, one of our vendors was able to actually, show up later that evening, and they were able to pull all of those batteries out that had problems, and they were able to replace them. And there was no impact to our system in any matter whatsoever. Also, there wasn't any danger to any of our servers in terms of losing material or information or anything along those lines. But I do want to thank the quick thinking of a number of police officers over there, including Lieutenant Gildehouse, because it's in a secured environment, and it's kind of the smoke was kind of seeping out a little bit, and to recognize that. And also Ken White and our IT folks who responded immediately to get over there and get the situation rectified. And of course, West Pierce Fire and Rescue, who came out and were able to assist. So I just wanted to bring that to council's attention. I know it's a major asset issue. So, but long story short, we were able to get everything resolved. The batteries have been replaced. I guess there was a couple of faulty batteries or something along those lines. So Mr. White is actually working with some folks to try and get to the bottom of why this occurred. Because I think the batteries did still have some life left in them. So, but just wanted to make you aware. Our legislative season is actually we're kind of in full force right now, though officially doesn't kick off until January 14th. I think as you heard last week, the governor's budget proposal expected to come out middle of December. We're looking at probably either Friday the 14th of December or maybe Monday the 17th, and he'll come out with his operating, transportation, and capital budget as funding in terms of what he wants the state to take part in. So we'll be tracking that. There's also talk of maybe a mini transportation package. Of course, we're looking for funding and support of doing a station assessment study for Amtrak. Also, some of the other major issues, affordable housing. One of the items that I'm very pleasantly pleased to learn that it looks like there will be legislation introduced has to do with this whole prevailing wage issue that came about last session that has what a lot of cities and AWC would define as unintended consequences. Well, where L&I from an executive administrative standpoint decided to increase or almost quadruple prevailing wage rates for landscaping contractors from about $15 or $16 an hour upwards of $40 or so. And that's just, there's really no justification or reasoning for that. And so if L&I is not going to administratively adjust it, then it's likely legislation will be introduced to legislatively adjust it. And of course, AWC and a number of cities, including Lakewood, are behind that. Also pleased to know that the Criminal Justice Training Commission is going to be requesting additional funding to have 19 law enforcement academies. I think right now, I want to say they're at 14. So to go to 19 is pretty substantial. A lot of police departments, including Lakewood, having turnover with folks retiring and then trying to recruit folks. You saw this evening we have some brand new police officers that just recently went through the academy, and then just some of the regular and routine stuff that's going to come forward. But once again, we'll be actively engaged in the legislative process. Unfortunately, on Friday, we were notified that we were unsuccessful in our grant applications for the Transportation Improvement Board grant. We had submitted for 3. We're kind of hoping that one of them we would have received, which would have been to complete Lakeview Drive from right in the Flet Creek area there. The other ones that we applied for were Veterans Drive to help that project, and then the other one was Major Street reconstruction of 100th from Lakeview all the way up to South Tacoma Way. So what we're going to do is we're going to debrief with TIB here in the near future get some feedback and comments from them. What we found interesting is that there weren't a lot of TIB grant awards within the Pierce County region. Fife had a huge request in support of funding for an overpass, University Place, Tacoma. I know Pierce County got some funding for a project, but Pierce County cities quite frankly, did not do too well. So, but again, we're gonna reach out and we're gonna talk with TIB and find out what we can do better so we can better compete next year. This is an annual grant program, so we'll come back next year as well. Also, our Public Works Engineering Department continues to meet with WashDOT on a regular basis on the Gravelly Lake Thorn Lane Connector Road. And Peter Rogoff, CEO of Sound Transit, will be here next Monday. So I've already given him a heads up that probably one of the questions that this body is going to have is, hey, where are we in that project in terms of negotiations with WashDOT? Who's on first there? But the city of Lakewood is still actively engaged in that. That's a relatively straightforward project, and so what the state is going to do instead of doing that kind of very complicated design build process that they did for really the large component of the project, they're just going to do a traditional design build project. So once they get to a point of coming to some kind of an agreement between WashDOT and Sound Transit, get the design finalized, they can just put it out in the street, bid it, and build it relatively quickly. I'm hoping not. That's what our Public Works Engineering Department, and now that Mr. Busich is on board, is moving them along, and then likewise others within our administration are having conversations with WashDOT, which is, okay, we got to move this along. And actually Sound Transit as well. I've been having conversations with Mr. Rogoff about that. I'd like to compliment our Lakewood employees who participated in a kind of number of fun United Way fundraising activities and raised over $500 for United Way. So it was some good times. It was just nice to let down a little bit. I'd also like to compliment our SSMCP program manager, Bill Adamson, and program coordinator, Sarah Luna, for really, quite frankly, a fantastic event at the South Sound Military and Community Partnership EOC event this past Friday morning. Actually, their leadership and resolute support of JBLM and everything that's military, I just felt was front and center. Very positive reflection on them as well as Lakewood as a whole, and I just want to compliment and recognize them for that. It's a real privilege to work with those two folks. Also, you might remember last year that Lakewood received recognition from the Health District for the adoption of our rental housing safety program. Actually, I'd like to comment on the speaker that came up here earlier. So the Merrill Gardens apartment complex is one of 15 properties representing over 1,000 living units, because most of them are multifamily, that are in violation of a number of building and or zoning code violations, and we are working with the property owners on that. Now, not every single unit is, but enough units within those multifamily apartment complexes or even single-family residential rental units have problems. So we are working with the property owners, and if we have to, and if they don't, then we'll be red tagging them and we'll be shutting them down. But right now, we haven't had to do that yet. But because of that rental housing safety program, you remember we were recognized by the Tacoma Pierce County Health Department with an award for the leadership that this body has taken. And last week, there was a seminar down in San Diego to talk about these types of programs, and our own planning manager, Courtney Brunell, was invited to go down and speak on it, and she was actually hosted by the Health District. They actually paid for her to go down there. Also, we have submitted this year, we have submitted to the Health District for recognition of our downtown sub-area plan, and so we should know relatively soon whether or not we'll receive some recognition on that. The fall cleanup that we had, we collected over almost 70 tons of refuse. So that's about 135,000 pounds of stuff. By the way, that does not include almost 1,200 tires. So it excludes the tires, doesn't include the tires. So that's a lot of mattresses and, a lot of stuff, We estimated that there was about one car coming through per minute for the 10 hours. And so about 64 cars per hour were were coming through. And then we estimated that, just kind of eyeballing it, that about 1 in 4 were repeats. So they were coming through multiple times, including our own on Saturday, including our own work crew, which came through on multiple occasions because they were driving by. They were out and about picking up stuff, yeah, yeah. And then there was a gentleman that was from Oak Brook, and he was up and down. After he cleaned out his own property, he had just had some regular household stuff he wanted to get rid of. Then he was up and down Phillips Drive picking stuff up, and he came through a couple of times, so. The levy lid lift for the Pierce County Library Services District, the latest numbers, actually, it's passed. It's, I think it's just got to be certified, but has a positive variance of 920 votes, or 0.87%. And there is no recount for those types of initiatives because it's not a person running for office or anything. And a real preliminary analysis shows that Lakewood was on the plus side by about 1,500 votes, which, just doing some math, I think we're about 54% yes, 46% no. But we'll know some more information in the near future on that. So now that that has passed, once it's certified, we'll get back to the table with the library about how they feel about moving forward with a library capital bond, and we'll be back in front of talking to this body, if not in December, certainly sometime in January about that. I might be getting out ahead of some folks, but since I have the information, I'm going to share it with you. The 2018 Larry Saunders Award, the second annual Larry Saunders Award. So the committee, which is led by the Lakewood Community Foundation Fund, they work with the city on this. The award is going to be going to the Rotary Club of Lakewood, recognizing their 62 plus years of inspired and visionary service to the Lakewood community. So I think they're going to be doing a public announcement sometime in early December. So I'll probably jump the gun. I probably violated something, but I have the information. Uh-oh, Councilmember Bodge looking at me. But so we don't plan on putting out any information, but I just wanted this body to know. On your calendar, a week from Wednesday, we have our joint event with the 2-2 Stryker Brigade and their command folks. And if you haven't provided me or the city clerk with $20, we need $20, please. Also that same evening, the county exec is going to be hosting a Strengthening Our Voice at PSRC regional meeting. We'll be sending some city staff to attend that on behalf of the city. On November 29th, we'll be, the police department will be having their 9th annual Fallen Officer Food Drive all day, as well as the 2nd annual Fallen Officer Blood Drive. There are 25 slots available if you'd like to give blood, so let us know or contact Joanne Nichols, and we'll get you squared away there. And then our 4th quarter employee recognition event at the Clover Park Technical College Rotunda is on December 5th at 7:30 to 9. And then, of course, on December 8th, which is Saturday, we have all afternoon into the early evening. We have our Christmas tree lighting and holiday festival and a number of fun events. Actually, in the morning, because it's a 5K run / walk. So with that, that's my report. And I just want to wish you and all of your families a happy Thanksgiving, and go Irish.
Questions for the city manager. Ms. Moss.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. City Manager. You answered one of my questions about the Merle Creek Apartments, so thank you for that information. Do we know where the clock is, and is it safe, that clock tower?
Oh, yeah, well, first of all, that's private property. We don't own that. That's somebody owns that. We have talked to the property owner in the past, and if somebody wants to buy it, I'm sure they're willing to sell it. They've given me a couple of prices. One time they told me it was going to cost $10,000. Another time they said $20,000. Also, that building, I have asked that we take a look at it, and Mr. Gum went out there last week. And so there's a good chance that the city is going to be taking abatement action on that building. So one way or the other, that building is probably going to have to come down. It's got major leak problems with the roof. Some folks have gotten in there and stolen some copper. One of the spaces next to the bagel shop, an individual who works at the bagel shop was sleeping in there, so we have rectified that. We also called out and this was done with the property manager in tow. We also directed the property manager to further secure the property. But at the end of the day, that building is deteriorating at a high rate. And again, Jeff believes that it's probably at the point of no return, that it's going to, unless somebody comes in like tomorrow and starts making improvements, it's going to have to be torn down.
Thank you.
Any other questions? We'll move to council comments. Ms. Moss.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It has been 2 long, stressful weeks for me, but it ended today, and I just want to thank you guys for the cards and your comments. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Mr. Volke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do want to comment on the PCRC meeting that Councilmember Simpson and I went to. Really the highlight of the evening is this disagreement. It really isn't a disagreement. It was a recommendation by the TCC, the Transportation Coordinating Committee, thank you very much, that is made of staffers, that the makeup of the group that goes to the PSRC be changed. And right now the makeup is 2 people from unincorporated Pierce County, 2 from Tacoma, and 1 from the small cities. And then there's Port of Tacoma, and I believe Pierce Transit is in there. But really it's those 5. And the recommendation of the TCC was to change one of the Tacoma people to a city one. So the cities would have 2, Pierce County would have 2, and Tacoma would have 1. And this was based upon the population estimates that are published annually by the OFM, Office of Financial Management at the state, the April estimates, and they'd been noodling this for a while. They talked about it like 2 years ago or 4 years ago. It has not been updated though. And because the growth outside of Tacoma is so much faster than the growth inside Tacoma, that they felt that this made sense. Tacoma sent, and I believe you all received a copy of the letter, and in opposition to this, of course. And their opposition, and Councilmember Simpson will correct me if I'm wrong, but to paraphrase it, their definition of population is not what the population is now, but what it might be in the future, based upon what they have agreed to take as part of their 2040 goal. But as the man from Fife brought up, who's the head of the TCC, he said, I mean, he produced the box, he produced the rules that the PSRC works under, and it said population, but it didn't say aspiring population, it didn't say future population, maybe it didn't say what your goal was, which they could do. They could just say, based upon what your goal is in the future, or what you've agreed to take as a population in the future, it says population. So I don't know that their arguments, we didn't vote on it, it wasn't an action item. Apparently it is going to be an action item in January. And right now, I would vote to accept the recommendations of the TCC. Yeah. Okay, go ahead, and then you can get back to me. Actually, I'm done.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to, first of all, compliment the actions of the police department and the individual officers regarding the fatal traffic accident that occurred on Bridgeport. I have had a number of citizens who happened to be witnesses or be there shortly thereafter, and they were very complimentary of how that went, and particularly considering the immediacy and the well reasoned response of for certainly the very first officers who were actually didn't respond. They witnessed the accident and were there. But that was another example of the community noticing the professionalism of police officers. Secondly, I guess I would just compliment that I was glad Chief Zarro forwarded us a copy and was glad to read the letter from County Council member Laudenberg regarding the proposed moving forward of divesting Western State Hospital of civil commitments, and her calling out to them that to just go ahead without a plan and without any transparency about the backgrounds of the various civil committed folks that they would intend to release is another positive piece, at least in the court of public opinion, and it's addressed to the DSHS secretary, but that I would hope that it also finds its way to others than just those that it was addressed to. Well, I have, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Ms. Barth. Mr. Simpson.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to follow on with what Councilmember Boki mentioned about last Thursday night's PCRC meeting. His recitation of the facts was accurate, surprisingly. No, and I would also agree with him that if we vote on this, I would tend to vote along TCC's lines as well. One point that was brought out, actually there were 2 points that were brought out that were not mentioned. One is that a number, I believe it was the gentlewoman from Tacoma who said, why is it that we get these things dropped on us at the last minute? And I agree. And I think there needs to be let's step back 5 yards and take a good look at this and vote on this in February rather than January. The second point, and Councilmember Boki, you may correct me here if I'm wrong, but did I not understand the PSRC representative to say, and I'm paraphrasing, that no matter what you people decide, we're going to decide for you? Because I had visions of John Caulfield dancing through my head at that moment.
Yeah, he threw
let's
out.
Get out.
I'll back that. Paul, what's his name, threw out that
Paul Ingram,
that he didn't even know if it was our decision, that it was something that PSRC executive board could decide. And then he finally just said, well, I'll go back and talk with Josh and some other guy about this. So it's like they were going to cut the deal because several, I don't know, there was some confusion for whatever reason with some people there who had read the document that we were given. And then it's, there's just oddities. There's only 40-something people in total out of the 4 counties. And there were clearly compromises made in the past. Let's say, like he said, Kitsap County, they have 3 representatives. And so one was from Bremerton, one was from somewhere else, and one was from somewhere else. And he goes, I think they just gave them all one. They didn't weight it by,
That's right.
So it's kind of weighted by population. And then Paul just throws in this, well, I think the executive board decides anyway. So it's like, well, why are we deciding? But I think the county actually has to make the recommendation,
So anyway, that's the only addition I would add to that. Other than that, Mr. Mayor, I would like to wish you and our colleagues happy Thanksgiving. Thank you.
Mr. Whalen.
Well, very few items. Last Thursday we had the legislative delegation here. I thought that was a good meeting. We had our points of put forth with our legislative agenda, so I wish them well. Just wanted to compliment the council getting through the budget this year. I thought it was a very streamlined process. I note that we've been identifying the major priorities for some time now, but we're bending the curve on some of the costs. And I think the amendment tonight hopefully will help us do that. With regard to the police department, I just want to echo the fine work that our police officers continue to do. When I was at the EDB meeting on Friday, a Lakewood resident came up to me, Herb Simon, and he says, I want to compliment you guys on this guy by the name of John Frazier. I think he's sitting in the back there. Pulled over, his daughter was involved in a little fender bender here, and John responded to the scene, and he said, you know, she was fearful, scared a little bit, and he was so good in his approach, I just have to tell somebody how good he was in his approach. So thank you, John, for that. Really appreciate that. It's always good to hear that when you're with a bunch of downtown business people. I mean, it really makes you proud. So that's what I'm thankful for as we head into Thanksgiving weekend, for great staff who have their heart in the right place in the city. Thank you.
So with respect to the TCC issue, maybe the city attorney will have an offhand answer for this at some other time, or it might be worth looking into. In another context, John and I are working on a group regarding South Sound 911's financing and governance. Bless you, my son. The bond attorney hired by South Sound 911 is particularly concerned with respect to the composition of the board of a proposed PDA, because it would all be elected officials, that it has to be proportionately representative because of some case law. And the King County Metro ran into that problem, I think is where the initial case came out of that she was concerned about. I guess it's not the case if you have electeds and unelecteds, but if you have an all-elected board, then you have to have proportional representation of some type. Right?
Which attorney? Which attorney, Mayor?
From
Diana?
It was Diana.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you might look into that, Diana Gregory of Pacifica. And so I wasn't thinking about the detail of it at the time I was listening. I was saying, well, that's fine, and going to the next step. But it might be something that applies to our PSRC issue when Puget Sound Regional Council's actually handed money out. I don't know if it applied to them or not, but worth looking into. Yeah, I've kind of been following that prevailing wage issue. My recommendation is that we have contracts that, if it came down to it, that we don't comply and let them sue us, because I don't think they have the authority under state law to, by administrative fiat, create a prevailing wage that doesn't match this statutory definition. And it's a lot of money. On a somber note, I joined Mr. Caulfield and Councilmember Brandstetter Wednesday for the memorial service for Sergeant Drew Waters, who was fatally injured in a training accident at JBLM. I want to commend Councilmember Simpson on his excellent op-ed in the News Tribune. I think it furthered the cause. Got some positive comments back on that. On last thing I did Friday I went to, with my day job hat on, but I went to an SSMC, a South Sound 911 group meeting with the folks at Portland Department of Emergency Communications, their PSAP. And for those of you who've had, I know Councilmember Ranstetter's involved and Mr. Caulfield's involved, but they have an interesting model that might be a solution to some of the remaining fire integration issues, because the issue that we're confronting is Local 31 of Tacoma Fire doesn't want to lose jobs and integrate, and others don't want to put them in the same building because, and Portland folks said this would be a disaster if you put uniformed call-taking dispatchers in the same room as civilians who make half as much in salary and benefits and work a different shift, and they're doing mostly the same job. This doesn't really work well. They brought out an additional point down there that you'd create an immediate sexual discrimination claim, because all of the quote older firefighters who are doing those jobs are male, and the majority of the civilian call takers are female. So you got them in the same room doing basically the same job, and you have a sexual discrimination claim unless everybody comes up. So that was, but they have an interesting model, and their compromise out of it, and they had all the same turmoil, is they have two fire liaisons who are lieutenants, one 12-hour shift a day, and somebody on call the other 12 hours that does the things that Tacoma's worried about. They stage the fire engines and work some of the things that the call takers really can't. And Chief Sharp and his brother, ex-Chief Sharp, and I were talking with the lieutenant afterwards, and just the four of us, and they seemed to think that improved service, something like that would, if it could be integrated into the larger districts, not the small ones, but Central Pierce, West Pierce, and East Pierce, that it would actually improve their function, because they're taking too much time on those things by battalion chiefs and planning every day. They've outgrown the way they used to do it, but don't have a new model. And so this would have non-call takers in there, a lot more than I probably needed to tell you. But it was interesting that they're actually, inadvertently, we may have run into a political and practical solution to some problems when they were down there to see something else. Friday, I had the opportunity to MC the SSMCP, Elected Officials Council meeting, and that really, I thought, was excellent. I commend Bill and Sarah Luna for an excellent job in setting that up. It was probably the best attended one yet. I had to put up an extra table or two. And it really went well until the very end, where I rooted for the wrong team and closed by sending a message from Bruce Downmeyer and myself, go Navy. You know, the Air Force, the Army, and even the Marines had a shout out by that. That's it. I don't think anybody from the Coast Guard was there. So that's it. Proportional representation, one more thing. Pierce Transit is wrestling with reconfiguring the board. The board will, at the end of the day, Lakewood will have one representative on the board no matter what happens. The history is, when the district was gerrymandered in the second attempt at the ill-fated tax measure was proposed, there was a compromise where the board was reconfigured. Before, it had been 3 Tacoma, 3 Pierce County, Lakewood, 1 switching between, trading off between Puyallup and UP, and 1 wild card. And it is now 2 Tacoma, 2 Pierce County, Lakewood, UP, Puyallup, and 5 Edgewood, and a wild card. 5 Edgewood because of their day population and the transit activity there was the rationale for that. Jake Fye, who's going to be chairman of the Transportation Committee, I think, was irritated for a couple of reasons. One, he wasn't there the day the vote was taken to change it and take the Tacoma-centric approach away. Well, by the way, when it was 6, this 3 county people all lived in the city of Tacoma. So it was 6 residents of Tacoma out of a 9-member board. And so he helped pass a proportional representation bill in the legislature. But he didn't do anything about changing when you had the meetings to change that. And they're quadrennial, they're every 4 years. So he wanted it to be immediate. The legal opinion is you can't be immediate, and then the board our board can't even convene the meeting to change. So he's come and testified. And additionally, he may be irritated because we didn't elect Ryan Mello as vice chair because he didn't have the votes that day. Nancy Henderson from Stillicum is the present chair, and I forget who vice chair is, as long as it wasn't me. Before it was Kent Keel, and it was the immediate past chair. So we'll see where he goes with that, but at present, and then when they have a reconvening PTEC board, it's a really weird configuration of the 7 members of the county council and one elected from every city that's inside the district, which would include Ruston and Federal and Fircrest. So it's a very non-representative group that's supposed to meet and change things. It's really messed up, but we're staying the way we are for another 2 years, is my reading. And then when and if it does change, Lakewood will still have 1 member, whether it's a 7-member board or a 9-member board. So that's where Pierce Transit is. Anything further? We're adjourned. Yeah, he's really exercised because he blew the legislation. All right. Yeah, it said, because it says you have to do this proportionate rough population deal.
Yes.
Exceed Army, Savannah. What machine is it?
Really? Yeah.
Big socket, big stone.
I wanted to say, so I requested a replacement device from you, so.
Where are you cutting? In where? In Boise. Well, I mean, our shop's in. But the sandstone's there.